Hey everybody, it's Hyper, and I got a special story for Storytime on Terror Tuesday this week for you guys, and it's another personal one from my past. And due to the nature of the story, I'm just gonna call this one the Outsider or the Outsiders. And it's not really a paranormal one. It's a real story of actual events that we can verify, we can explain. So it's not like something where it's like, oh, I don't know what happened there. Oh, it's a mystery. Oh, it's a ghost. This one's just a time of life that was kind of scary and kind of like thriller esque, if you know. Anyways, I'll let you guys see for yourselves and get into the video on Terror Tuesdays. See ya. Anyways, so this story is gonna take us back to a very long time ago, probably like 20 years ago. No, more like 21, 22 years ago. And this is when I first moved into our second family home. Yeah, we had just come back to New Mexico, and this was God. This had to have been like 2001, 2002 timeline. I don't even remember. I'd have been 5 or 6, maybe 6 or 7. I think my sister was like 7, so I'd have been like 5 or 6, something like that. Anyways, we were moving into our new house, and I grew up in New Mexico, right? And anybody who's familiar with anywhere in New Mexico, especially if you live like in the mesa parts of New Mexico, the mesas are like vast expanses of desert, and I mean, we lived in one. We were in a brand new neighborhood that was really far away from town, right? And when I say far away, I mean really far away. So there was only one highway. There were two highways to get to it, actually, but none of them were through to where our new house was. They went around. So when our house was first being built, we had to drive through empty desert for like 30 minutes. Like, when we first drove there, we would go through this road, and we would have to go through like a National Guard armory. So like it took a long time, right? So like, maybe even 45 when we very first moved out there, especially with all the construction. But perspective, it's a really long way. When I went to high school, even after there was a highway, it was like a 20-minute drive to high school going like 55. So we lived far. And that's just how New Mexico is. Vast expanses of like nothing, right? Just in the middle of the desert. Beautiful area. Beautiful. I miss it so much. Climate is super nice. That was just perspective to show that we were alone, right? This new house was far out of town. It was already far apart for everything, but we were far out of town, and it was just a brand new subdivision. There were only two houses in the neighborhood at the time. So our house was up, ready to live in, and we had one neighbor in the entire neighborhood that was also living in their house. All the rest of them were barely even like skeletons, and the ones that weren't even skeletons, they were just like subdivided plots, right? And we have these concrete cinder block walls. It's really nice. I actually hate the East because they don't use walls for the houses, and you have no privacy, you have no safety, your house isn't protected from the elements, and it's just insane to me. But we had like these brick walls, so like the neighborhood felt like really like secluded, I guess, really secure, really kind of closed off, but in a good way. It was quiet, it was safe, you know. At least we thought, right? And at this time, my dad was a detective and a federal agent. It's like kind of spill over the years. He was a police officer, detective, federal agent. Before you guys jump on my dad's back and think he's a terrible person, because that's a popular thing to do with police officers nowadays. He worked crimes against children. He did some anti-terror task force stuff. So he was a good guy. He wasn't just some beat cop treating people like crap. He really did honest to God good work. He helped people that were harming children in very horrible ways. And being in New Mexico, since that's such a common thing there, he was very busy all the time, which means he was gone a lot, right? So he worked nights, he worked so graveyard shifts, swing shifts, and he would be like going into work at like 6, 7 p.m. and not coming home till 6, 7 in the morning, because he worked like 70, 80, 90-hour weeks, sometimes even more than that. He worked a lot. He worked his butt off to provide for his family. And it was good because he provided for us, but at the same time, he wasn't there a lot. I saw him like once a week for extended periods of time. There were times where he'd be gone for months and months on end, and I just wouldn't see him. It wasn't anything against him, but it kind of set the groundwork for my mom to be pretty paranoid about a lot of stuff, especially since we kind of lived way out in the middle of nowhere. And yeah, I was alone a lot too because of that, because it was my sister. We didn't really hang out that much. We honestly didn't, and there were no other kids there, so it was just me. And I loved to be outside. So I would explore the desert, I would explore the bones of the neighborhood, up until we got some neighbor kids, which we eventually did. They didn't stay long though. But yeah, I got used to being alone, and I got brave exploring, and I really like to do stuff like that. I explored the mesa by like this water tower we had. Yeah, just up and down the neighborhood on my bike and stuff. And a lot of it my mom didn't know about. She thought I was just riding my bike in the front yard, but I would go pretty far. But anyways, that's what I would do. I just hang out alone, and it was kind of spooky at night. You know what I mean? Like, it was nice because you don't hear any cars, you don't see any lights, you just see all the stars and stuff. But when a car did drive by, it's kind of weird. It's like, why are you here? You know what I mean? Like, why are you here? Nobody else is here. I know you're not here for your neighbors, not here for us, so why are you here? Anyways, some time goes on, and we're just sitting in the living room one day doing homework. And my dad wasn't home this night. It was my mom, my sister, and myself. And we're sitting there. I think something was on the TV, and we kind of heard something weird in the garage, right? So we have this garage that has 3 doors. It's got the main garage door that you could drive the cars in, like the carport. Then it's got a door on the opposite side of that leads to the pantry, then to the kitchen. So there's like 2 doors before you get to the kitchen. One's an interior door, so it's flimsy, but one's an exterior door that has like metal paneling on in and outside. And then there was a 3rd door that was on the exterior wall of the garage. And that was just another like port that you could open, you know, normal door knob, everything, and you could just open it and go into the garage that way from the side of the house. Anyways, we're sitting there. I want to say I was doing homework. My sister was sitting in the living room. She had a broken leg at the time. And I don't know what my mom was doing. I don't remember. It's been so long. But I remember sitting there. We heard like a thump and then something moved in the garage. And we're like, what was that? And, you know, we had just moved. We had boxes piled up. So we assumed like, no, nothing crazy. That it was just maybe like, you know, boxes settling or the house settling or something. But it was a very odd sound. It was kind of like a thump and like, I don't want to say like a whoosh, but it kind of like, you know, like when you open a window and like, you feel all the doors push out because the pressure changes in the house, something like that, right? And then like it sounded like something moved after that, so it was very weird. And we kind of like looked over, and my mom was like, "Oh, that was weird, that was creepy," but we didn't think anything of it. You know, you just assume the house settling, blah blah blah. Anyways, maybe 10 minutes passed, something like that. We're just sitting there talking, and all of a sudden we hear something else, and it sounds like somebody grabs the doorknob, right? We're like, that was weird. Something touched the doorknob. We think maybe it's just like the wind or something again, because we're like, that doesn't make any sense. Who would be here, this and that? And then what happened next was we're just like hanging out, like, okay, that's really weird. We got kind of creeped up. So I kind of like was get really on edge right that. And then we all kind of looked at each other, and a couple seconds later the doorknob like twisted and shook like somebody was trying to open it. Like they twisted it and pulled it, but it stopped because it was deadbolted, right? So, and then we're like, oh my god, there's no way that wasn't somebody articulating the doorknob. So I get up. My mom was like, go to the room. I get up. My sister gets up, and we go, and we jump under the blankets because we're little, you know. We were scared. We don't know what to do. And when you see your mom that scared, you're like, oh god, that's not bad. That's not a good thing, right? So we were terrified, right? It kind of would have been different if my dad was there because other similar things happened later on, and my dad like kept his cool, stuff like that. He'd be like, all right, just stay where you are, and then he'd go get his pistol and stuff and go check. But it was different with my mom, right? She knew how to shoot and stuff, but she wasn't a fighter, you know. And our neighbor, the neighbor mom, she was like 5'2", 5'3". She was a tiny little thing, like, and their dad was gone on too. So you know, it was just us. It was just, and you know, and be in the situation. So we go run. I flatten out on the bed. I was terrified, and my mom calls my dad, and he calls, I guess, an old buddy from the police, and they come and do like health and wellness, or I don't know, it's like a courtesy check or something. And they come by the house. He checked outside, he used a spotlight, checked in the bushes, had his lights on, hung out in the house for a little bit, and nothing happened. And then later on, we heard some more stuff, but we all just stayed in the room all night. I think my mom stood up all night, and it was crazy. And then morning comes along, and nothing crazy happens. So my dad eventually comes home later, and we kind of forget about it. And we were telling him about this, telling some other people, and we're like, oh my god, that's so scary, that's so scary. And from his perspective, before people think like, oh yeah, maybe he was one of those people trying to go into abandoned houses and stuff, and so it's a common thing, at least in the Southwest, when there's a new housing development going up and people are just barely moving in. They'll put their furniture and belongings there before they actually live there, which is a terrible idea because you're a target, right? And they'll go and steal the appliances and stuff. But this house, you would know if somebody was there, right? If you pulled on that side of the house where that side door was, that's where I used to park my truck when I was working in high school and college. And I would come home at night late most of the time. So I would see if somebody was in the house because the lights would be on, and you could see easily that the lights were on. You could even tell if the TV was on because it would change the way the lighting looked outside. And you would see the front lights on too. You knew somebody was home, and you could hear it through the backyard. So they knew somebody was home. So anybody who's like, oh yeah, they weren't trying to steal something. That's the scary part. And around this time too, my sister and I had heard like walking in gravel. I don't know if you guys have ever heard what walking in gravel sounds like, but it's like that crunch, like, and it's a human walking in gravel is not the same as like a coyote or something like that. You grew up in the desert, right? We had coyotes in our yard all the time. We had all kinds of like owls and bats and all that other sorts of stuff. But the human walking through gravel is a very specific sound. It's like a crunch and then a long lift up of the foot. You can hear when a human's walking, like human beings recognize what human footsteps sound like. We would hear that, and everybody was like, kind of like, oh, they're just thinking of it. Oh, it's just a coyote, or it's something in the gravel because we had gravel everywhere. There's like no big deal. And we would hear stuff like that, but we didn't think any of it. It kind of creeped us out, but it was like, okay, if the adults think it's nothing, we'll trust them. It's no big deal. Anyways, my dad eventually comes home. We kind of forget that it happens. You know, we settle into the house. We're pretty comfortable in this and that. We still hear weird sounds sometimes outside. No big deal, right? My dad comes home. We go outside and we check the door finally. And he wants me to be part of that because he was showing me how to take care of the house, how to fix things and all that. So he grabs like his flashlight and everything. We go outside. I mean, it's daytime, but you know, the garage can be dark and stuff. And, you know, we didn't have an opener and all that. So it was dim. But we were checking the door and we had found, or I guess my dad had found, that the door was broken. Like the door was broken. Somebody had forced the lock. And when you force the lock on one of these like residential locks, you have to put a lot of effort into doing it. When you do it, it makes the lock inoperable, right? So it kind of felt like loose in there, but you heard like stuff in there like moving around and grinding, and it just didn't lock properly anymore at all. Like you couldn't lock it and close it. So we just barricaded it up with a bunch of heavy stuff that even my dad couldn't move unless we took like an hour or so to move it from the inside. So you could not access that from the outside anymore. It was barred off, barricaded from that point on. But that was just proof that somebody had forced the lock on the outside and kicked the door in or something to get into that house. So somebody truly did force themselves in. So we weren't imagining it. Somebody tried to break and enter into our home. Well, it was just two kids under the age of like 8 or 9, and then my mom while my dad was out. So that was terrifying. But anyway, my dad was home from that point on. At that time, he wasn't living with us yet. He was coming to meet us from his federal work and go back to being a police officer, detective, and all that. So he just wasn't even in the state at the time. So he couldn't even come home if he wanted to. So that was pretty scary for us as well. Anyways, time goes on. A few more neighbors start moving into the neighborhood. And eventually we get these kids next door. This is probably like a year or two later. In between that time, my sister and I still hear those sounds. Like people walking on the walls. Maybe, you know, on the wood. Or not on the wood, on the sand outside in the gravel. And it makes a very specific sound inside the house, because when you're walking on that dry, compacted dirt, and then the vibrations go through the foundation, you can hear it on the inside pretty easily. And we would hear stuff like that. I had a room right next to the front door, right next to the gravel, right next to the concrete where people would walk up. So even if people on a really quiet day were walking on the sidewalk on the bottom, I can hear their footsteps like through the concrete. It was weird, but I always knew if somebody was going to ring the doorbell or something like that, because my room was literally right there, very thin wall and stuff. So we would hear stuff like that, and I guess we just got used to it. My sister and I would talk about it. It would scare us sometimes, but no big deal. Anyways, time passes. We get neighbors. We start playing with them. They're around our age. My sister didn't really play with them. I did. We were always outside, riding our bikes outside, exploring the neighborhood and stuff. And one day we're riding our bikes up and down, and then we see this model house go up, because they start showing all the other people that are wanting to buy homes in this development the model, right? And we're like, okay, that's cool. So we'd play around there, because it was like a model building. No one was ever there. Like, they were never there. The mailboxes were kind of on that side, and the brick wall was put up too. So it was kind of like this open play area that was like naturally enclosed off, so it was safe. We didn't have to worry about cars and all that. But one day we kind of hear like music and water running. I'm like, what is that? So we we ride our bikes up the road to like the model house, and we kind of listen from a distance, because we're kids. We didn't want to like stick our heads into like a mousetrap, you know what I mean? And we're listening, and we hear music, we hear water running, we kind of see a light on. It was hard to tell, but it kind of looked like there was a light on in the back of the house too. And we're like, that's weird. We didn't see a car anywhere. It was just the model house and then the lights and stuff. So it was kind of weird. We told the adults. They called the cops. The cop went and checked, and he was like, yeah, I didn't find anything in the house. He was like, but it looks like maybe somebody was using the shower, the plumbing or something. He was like, I don't know, maybe they're testing the water or something like that. But it was weird, because it's like, if you're a plumber working for a construction company, wouldn't you have your truck with you or something? You know, why would you just be there? So it was weird. We don't know what happened with that, but it was just another happening that 100% happened, and we just didn't have an explanation for it as a kid. So anyways, months go by. We we keep hearing these creepy sounds outside, and I'm like, it's not a coyote. And I was kind of getting to the age where I was like, okay, we've been around here enough. Like, that's something specific, right? So I kind of would get uncomfortable to have my window open at night, and I used to just leave it open. It's summertime in New Mexico. You could leave your window open all night and be fine. And it was nice. You'd hear the outside, you'd hear the crickets, you'd hear like the mourning doves, sometimes an owl. It was really cool. It was really nice, really peaceful. And then I stopped doing that because I would get weirded out. So did my sister. Anyway, some more time goes on, and we swear one time I swear I hear somebody like scraping against the stucco, because a lot of houses in New Mexico have stucco exteriors. You could look it up. It's like STUCCO. It's like this kind of plaster that's textured, but it's very durable for outside houses. And when you scrape against it, it's extremely loud. It's kind of like rubbing against the rough side of Velcro. It's very loud. And inside, you hear it very heavily. And I was like, I heard something like that. I definitely heard something like that. And I remember being a little kid, I started to finally get scared. I was like, okay, I don't know what's outside my window, and I can't see. It was so dark because we didn't live near a city or anything. When you had a light on inside and your window was open in night, if you weren't outside, you couldn't see outside. Like, it just was overexposed, so you could not see. You would see to where the light extended, and then outside of that, it was just a wall of black. So I couldn't see what was out there. So I flattened myself against the wall, and I kind of inched my way towards the window and closed it without exposing myself to the open window because I was scared. I was a kid. I was scared. I was like, I don't know what's out there, whatever. And I closed the curtain. I pushed it. With my back flat against the wall, I'm just using one arm to like close the window and close the curtain because I was scared. It was, in hindsight, it was really funny, and I probably looked pretty stupid. But yeah, that's what happened. And then again, some months go by, and then one night, like, I swear, I saw somebody walking past my window at like 9 or 10 at night in the summertime, and I freaked out. I didn't tell anybody about it because I was like, they're not gonna believe me. I kind of told my sister about it, and she was like, really? And she was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw somebody too, 1 or 2 times. And this was still like 3 or 4 houses on the street. It took them years to put this neighborhood up. It took them a long time. This is when they actually cared about the houses they built, so they were built much better. You know, they actually had the supports, like, and the trusses and like the support beams and stuff touching. You know, it wasn't just like, oh, if a nail gets into the beam once every 10 or 11 times, like, I'm a good roofer, you know, trust me, bro, kind of thing. They actually cared, right? And it was just weird. We had a shed at that time too, and it was built on the side of the house near my sister's room, my room, and like the master bedroom was on the other side. But if you were climbing on the shed or something, you could hear it in the house because it had like a lot of bass to it, like it carried. And we were convinced we heard somebody climbing on top of that. Very specific sound too, and we're like, this is so weird, so scary, whatever. And there was like this little enclave behind that too, like this little closed off garden area behind the shed that I used to like to play in. But that's what we assumed, like somebody had been back there. Anyway, some months go by, and I remember my mom telling the story to like it was either my aunt or my neighbor Debbie. They had finally moved in, and they were older kids. They were probably middle school, starting the high school years at the time, and they were talking about some of the weird things that happened. They're like, oh my god, that's crazy. And he was a daddy, big burly guy. He was a furrier. He was a really cool guy. Him and my dad, my family got along, and he was really like paying attention to a lot of stuff too. You know, we were ready to protect our families, but it's still scary, right? Anyways, they're having this conversation one day when we're a little bit older. Like, this is years and years after that person tried to get into our house. This is around the time my dad was a detective, and he put away some pretty high-profile people, right? So when he was working crimes against children and doing some other stuff, he put away some politicians and some other police officers that were involved in some disgusting stuff, right? So he had a target on his back, and he was even warned by the department and other people within like policing in the state that, like, look, if you're gonna do this kind of work and you go after certain people, they're gonna notice, right? And we started hearing like tapes reeling, right? It was really creepy. So my dad had already been getting harassed by some people on behalf of some pretty powerful people, from what I understand. And I'm gonna let him tell you more about that story later on. But we were convinced that there was a bug in the house. We would hear like a recorder reeling, and at the time there were still tape recorders and stuff being used. You know, it wasn't all digital yet, especially in departments and stuff. You know, especially in like small areas like Bernalillo, Rio Rancho, you know, Albuquerque. And it's so easy for that to happen, and it does happen. There are so many documented cases of cops having their houses bugged by people who are like they have ill intentions. And in my parents' room, you would hear the tape recorder reeling, and I don't remember what it was. I don't think it turned out to be a tape recorder, but you can kind of see like the frame of mind my family was in at the time, because around that time we started hearing these sounds a lot more, and then my parents started thinking they heard stuff in the backyard too. It was just uncomfortable because my dad, he found out some really insane stuff, and he brought it to the attention of the department. He was doing these investigations on these politicians and other bad cops and stuff, and yeah, that's another story, but it really did put our family in a very tight, scary spot. I don't know exactly what happened with that, but I just knew a couple weeks later, my mom was talking to my aunt and the neighbors again, and this is what scared me the most, is they had said that other families had caught pictures or videos and were talking about somebody that was roaming in people's backyards. And they had like proof that there was a person going around looking in people's windows, hanging out in their backyards at night, and like just peeping and doing weird, creepy stuff. And in that moment, I was like, oh my God. Like, I wasn't imagining it as a kid. Like I was not imagining that this was happening as a kid, because a kid doesn't think about things like that. Like I didn't know that there were people that just walk around peeking in windows. Like that's weird, right? So a kid is not going to be like, you know, and the possibility scratched my mind, but I didn't know it was like a common thing for weirdos and creeps to do, and they were doing that. They were doing that. So in that moment, I knew for a fact, I was like, that had to be it, because it's such a specific sound. And I mean, people might have like drawn or like written it off and stuff, but it was like I knew what I heard. I knew what I heard, and it scared the hell out of me from that point on. So I always remember, like, I stopped sleeping with my window open. As I got older, I didn't care as much, you know, because your teenage years, and after that, you kind of get used to it, and you're not as, like, scared and stuff like that, you know. But, like, from that point on, like, it just kind of got weird. Like, I would notice an open window in the house at night, and you can't see far out of it, and it'd be like, oh, that's weird. And then eventually it kind of stopped. As when we got older, it happened less and less, which is also an uncomfortable thing to think about, that as we got older, it happened less, you know, for a number of reasons. But it also kind of makes sense because the neighborhood was built up by then. So by the time I was like middle school and high school, we had dozens of neighbors. The neighborhood was almost done and stuff like that. So it virtually completely stopped, right? We have new issues in that neighborhood now where my parents live because, well, there's a lot of like thuggish people moving in. It's a pain in the ass, you know. That's what happens. You move into an area, builds up, then other people move in, and either gets gentrified or not, or whatever. It's just crazy. But you're more or less worried about organized activity than solo breaking and entering and stuff like that, robberies. And it's crazy too because we've had we had a car stolen out of our yard, and they found it in the middle of the desert, burnt out and on fire. Right. So this was kind of around the same time. So a lot of crazy stuff. And it was kind of vindicating as a kid because, you know, you tell parents these stories and they might not listen to you. It happens in scary movies all the time where the kid's like, hey, this is happening. The adults are like, oh, they're just imagining it. They're just playing around. But this was a very real thing for me. It wasn't a movie. It wasn't a TV series, and it actually happened. So yeah, I mean, sorry, I just was interrupted. My wife came home with our dog, so I had to go help her out. But it was scary, guys. It's a very scary story, a very weird time in my life for all of that to happen, because like you think that stuff happens in the movie and stuff where somebody's peeking in your windows for overtime and then they try and break in and stuff. They've been watching you. It's like that actually happened. And it's such a scary thought. You know, I think about my kids and my wife in the future, and I don't know. It's uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable. Thank God my dad was who he was, because he was a tough SOB, right? He would have taken care of us just fine. But when we were alone, completely different story. I don't know what would have happened with my wife, my sister, and I. And it's not even a comfortable thing to think about, but you know, makes people wonder. Makes you wonder. And yeah, that's a pretty scary story from my past for Terror Tuesday. It's not like a spooky story. It's not a ghost story, but it's a very true story, and it's an uncomfortable one at that, right? Uncomfortable one at that. So I don't know. Hopefully you guys got something out of the story. If it wasn't just listening to it and learning about it, maybe thinking about, oh, I'm hearing those sounds. Maybe my kid is talking about something. Maybe you should think into it. You know, sometimes kids do make up stories, but even if they do make up stories, you don't have to go off the deep end and be like, oh my God, somebody's trying to get my kid. You could just be like, all right, this warrants a little bit of further investigation. You know what I mean? Before you kind of write it off as imagination and stuff like that. Anyways, I don't know. Hopefully this was a good video. Maybe it was too serious. Maybe it wasn't. I'm not sure. Thank you guys so much for joining me on Terror Tuesdays. Stay tuned for those streams and other videos. And a special thank you to all my Patreon supporters and my channel members and other people who have donated to charities and events in the past. Nakotaz, the Mumba Games, of course, who's my #1 supporter and donator over time. Mac P, Angel Skywalker, King Bozo, Mr. Becker, and everybody else who has donated to these streams and videos over the years. If I left your name out, I'm still working on the full list to roll out that so everybody can see who all is being awesome and helping me put content out like this. Anyways, thank you all so much. Thank you to my family and friends. You guys are all amazing. Until the next video or stream, I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.